Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Moduli Stack. Kind, gentle viewers, I am so happy you have continued to watch my videos, even though I checked out of the entire planet for quite some time. But I have been doing the Thursday Gold and Platinum King of the Hills. If you are Gold or Platinum, check those out and participate. Check those out regardless. They are some pretty fun tournaments. And that's mostly what I've been doing as far as casting goes. Let me pull up some fancy overlays here. But I'm going to try to be a little bit more focused in the casts that I do upload to my YouTube channel. This one in particular, I'm going to try to talk about how to analyze your own replays and maybe a little bit about how to focus on a replay. I've found that a lot of players don't really know how to get useful information out of their own replays. So I'm going to try to analyze that. And what you should usually do is just try to clear your mind a little bit. When watching your replay, you're going to have the game in your head, and you're going to remember what it was like to play the game. But you should try to do whatever possible to just be an impartial observer. One great technique I found is to actually just switch to my opponent's vision. So I'm going to be doing this replay, by the way, for Tiny Hands. So you can go to your opponent's vision and just don't even think that you were a Zerg playing this game. Pretend you're a Protoss player and see what's going through your mind. For example, right now, as Protoss, we are trying to expand, maybe. We have a forward gateway. We might be trying to put on some pressure with Zealots. We're also going to try to block this hatchery. Interesting. So thinking this way can be pretty profitable. But I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to do something much more restricted. I'm having some frame rate issues. Is that? Okay. Won't worry about that too much. So what I'm going to do is just try to get a really broad sense of this game. You should already have a broad sense if you played it. But I haven't seen this replay before, so I'm going to go all the way up to ×8 and just stare at the minimap. Okay, I'm not even going to look at what's happening in the game. In fact, I'm going to just scroll totally off to see what's happening. Look at this big wall off going down for the Protoss player we can see in the minimap. Zerg has taken his expansion. I don't see a lot of drones at the expansion, actually. You can tell that just from the minimap. Some buildings have gone down. We can glance at the production tab, I guess. Warpgate research is finished. Roaches and upgrade. Protoss has his expansion running pretty well. Looks like maybe a little better than the Zerg. We can even sort of pull up harvester count. Zerg is down in harvesters, but up in army supply at this point. Significantly up in supply. Of course, you usually expect that when you see a lot of roaches out of the Zerg player, because roaches cost an insane amount of food. My god. And we see that Protoss is getting Colossi, while Zerg is going for Infestors. It's an interesting choice. Infestors on 2 base, not sure how I feel about that, but we can talk about this when we go through the replay the next time. Big battle, huge battle going on there. Zerg looks like he won that pretty solidly and is pulling back. Now, the biggest observation I have about Zerg at this point, Zerg has not been expanding. This is very late in the game to have an expansion, 18 minutes. I mean, it's you don't really want to live by hard rules. Oh, Zerg just really overcommitted with a bunch of forces at the front and lost them. Anyway, you don't want to go by hard and fast rules like I take my expansion now, I do this at this time, whatever. But you pretty much want to be putting your third up around 10 minutes. A little later is acceptable, but 18, far, far, far too late, especially if Protoss has gotten their expansion up so quickly. If they've gotten their expansion up that quickly, might even think about a faster third base. Anyway, I ramble. I am rambling at this point, but we can see that good game has been called. We can also see that 1,160 minerals and not so much gas right now for the Zerg player. So this might have been a little bit of an issue. This third base came earlier. More drones could be allocated to gas. But I think Zerg's drone count is a bit low for this time of the game. So we are going to, no, we're not going to quit the replay. We're going to restart completely. And now, with all that stuff in mind, now we've got the broad strokes of the game. I'm going to try to get a little more specific. Now, I've done some previous casts, and if you haven't seen those, you should watch them. Everything that I've called laddering up so far has been what will I say, bronze through diamond. And I did a few casts where I just kind of analyzed tiny mistakes. You know, when are your drones coming out? Exactly. You know, are you building stuff exactly on time? And I'm going to try to be a little bit more broad here, just so I'm not covering the same ground. But of course, I still think that is one of the most useful ways to improve. Just be very critical. Just, am I making stuff exactly the right time? And I am seeing Tiny Hands, as a matter of fact, have pretty good timing. Stuff coming out just when you would expect. Or, well, just the instant that the money is available. And how about this hatchery? Probably going to be thrown off a little bit by this probe right here, but no problem. Oh, I was going to say gas had started, but actually that was a gas steal. Tiny Hands working on this pylon with two... Sorry for pulling up the APM. I was just curious. That thing is so large. Tiny Hands realizing I got to put my pool down. Got to spend that money. Pool could have probably gone down slightly earlier, but not the biggest deal. I don't mind this too much. I usually wait until my Zerglings are out to try to kill this pylon, but this is totally okay. It will allow pretty fast hatchery. What has Zerg seen so far? This pylon on the high ground. Not a lot of information. Should always watch to see if Protoss is putting down a forge or a gateway first, and we do see a gateway at the front, along with cybernetic score, followed by a forge. So this is a pretty... I kind of like this expansion build. Of course, no gas yet for Protoss, which is less than optimal. Very weird build, basically, coming out of Protoss. But we're not going to focus too much on what Protoss is doing. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to put the camera on Tiny Hands. Only Tiny Hands vision. Yeah, and they got a nice little circle here around the extractor. So anyway, nothing is happening just yet to point out. Tiny Hands continuing to spend his larva, which is something that I always love to see. 4 Zerglings coming out. That's a great number. Really pretty solid play here so far from Tiny Hands. One little thing that I would think about is these drones on gas. It's very hard to get your economy running earlier. You usually want, once you get this metabolic boost, you usually want every bit of minerals possible. And here, Tiny Hands rushing for a lair. Really fast lair. Now, when you do this kind of play, getting a lair immediately off of one gas, you have to realize you're a little bit committed. You're investing a lot of resources into a lair very early, and now Roach Warren going down. This inject is a little bit late. If it comes pretty soon, I wouldn't worry too much about that. Okay, it's going to be a creep tumor. Yeah, that's okay, because of course there aren't a lot of resources around to spend. So the thing is, what is the purpose of this fast lair build? This is the kind of question I've asked a lot in previous casts. But I'm going to just keep asking these kinds of questions. Why is Tiny Hands getting a lair so fast? And what is he going to do with just one gas? Now, one rule of thumb here is if you're rushing up for something like this, and I really say he's rushing because look at how many drones there are at the expansion, 2. Tiny Hands is at worker parity right now, and that's a decent place to be. I do like seeing that. Has Zergling speed. Doesn't have the best scouting information. That's one thing you really do want to make better decisions. But anyway, the rule of thumb, I always distract myself like this. My rule of thumb is if this lair finishes and you do not immediately see some lair tech beginning, there's been a mistake. This lair should have been later if Tiny Hands did not intend to do something with it right away. The money spent on this lair could have been spent on another queen, and that is enormous. A queen, I don't know the exact number, but it more or less doubles the production of a hatchery. Basically would take Tiny Hands' production up, what, a third compared to where he's at now? And that's huge. It could have allowed him to squeeze out a few more drones. a lot of possibilities, and this lair is just sitting here, still not doing anything. Tiny Hands just now going up to 2 gas, getting an evolution chamber for the +1 melee, or missile attack, rather. But again, no use of the lair. No use of the lair whatsoever. This is definitely a premature lair. You should get used to taking drones off of gas when you don't need gas. And, you know, really put some thought into that lair timing. Well, I've said it about 500 times, so I'll just stop. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about this force here. Tiny Hands is getting some Zerglings and some Roaches. Lots of players do like to get some Roaches out pretty fast. I feel okay about that because of course, Tiny Hands has not opted for Spine Crawlers. One Spine Crawler on this map I think is a really good idea because if you just put a Spine Crawler here, it covers all of this area, and they are so tough. They take so many hits. They do so much damage. And, you know, if you're going to have this kind of force, you might want it a tiny bit smaller with the Spine Crawler in the back. Keep the units up here to defend. Spine Crawler, so good, so nice. But yeah, this kind of force, I always worry a little bit. Is it worth it to spend this much gas? And this is, you know, 100 gas for these Roaches. At this point, when you're not really sure if you're being attacked or not, as a matter of fact, you probably know you're not. If you scouted, I don't know if Tiny Hands saw this early enough, but if you scout and you see this cannon up front and get the sense that your opponent's expanding, you don't see a lot of units, you might want to wait a little bit longer to start building up your force. Drone a little bit more, get your economy running a little bit stronger, so that way you can get a bigger force later. But it's so tough when you don't have good scouting information, and I definitely want to say Tiny Hands should be doing better with his overlords. There should be an overlord here, so at the very least, you know when Protoss is breaking down these rocks. But you can often sneak an overlord here to see when this expansion is taken. If you had an overlord, you would see that the expansion has been taken and realize, oh wait, I don't need to make units. I can make a lot of drones. Is good to see an Overseer coming out. That is quite nice. That is a good use of the lair. Hello, Calculus. I am busy. I am totally busy. So you're keeping the Overlord spread around. Having an Overlord over here is really good. You can float that over for some more information. A lot of Zerg players get into this mindset of, I need to stop a 4-gate. And you know, it's good to not die to 4 gates, but it's also good to realize your opponent is not always going to 4-gate you, and knowing when to respond appropriately is pretty good. See a Spore Crawler going up. Is that in the main? Yeah. So, right. Yeah, Tiny Hands really paying the price here for lack of information. That Spore Crawler is a drone plus 75 minerals. So that's 125 minerals plus lost mining time. It's a big deal. Still, Tiny Hands is macroing pretty well. Is a little behind on worker count, and that's just because he did make so many units. And again, the second queen, very late. But doing well in supply is going to have a lot of units. And the thing is, usually, especially as Zerg, you should have this mindset that when I'm making a lot of units, I should follow that up by attacking. Because, again, as Zerg, you're choosing between making units and making drones. And as a result, if you make a lot of units, you've sacrificed something. And you should try to get the most use as possible out of those units. I'm not saying you should automatically suicide every unit you ever make. It's not what I'm saying. It's just that if you're making units, you should be planning for an attack. Even if you're making units defensively, you should be saying, okay, if he attacks me, I'll be ready. If he doesn't attack me, then I'll wait a little bit to build even more units and then hit him with everything I've got. And it often is good to time those attacks with upgrades and stuff like that. Tiny Hands grabbing a melee attack. Perfectly okay. And Roach Speed. Great upgrade. Going up to 4 gas. But once again, this is a pretty late stage in the game to have kind of mediocre saturation. No, I withdraw that. I withdraw that. Tiny Hands is doing fine on supply. He's making a lot of units, but now he had better be aggressive with these units. And what I would say is when you're in this kind of position, you have a big army, and you're starting to feel like, okay, I can threaten my opponent. I can really put pressure on him. I would say expand behind it. So wait for some nice timing. For example, when Roach Speed finishes. As soon as Roach Speed finishes, immediately push out with all of your units while expanding. It's a fine idea. It's tough. It's tough on close positions to do something like that with a lot of confidence. But, you know, you really have to understand, Protoss can't just walk his whole army over here to kill your base without leaving his base really, really vulnerable. So don't worry so much about taking this expansion significantly earlier. Oh, that's a cute idea, killing these destructible rocks. Yeah, missing a lot of injects, and that's early in the game. Those injects are really, really critical. You're gonna pay a lot for losing those. Okay, so Protoss is set up pretty defensively here. Of course, the cannons in the front is probably not the most wise thing. But yeah, Tiny Hands. I've seen this kind of play from a lot of Zerg players, where they sort of make units and then they don't know what to do, so they sort of make some other stuff. And, you know, we see Infestors coming out. And there's nothing particularly wrong with Infestors. It's just, look at how much gas has been spent on all these roaches. Every 4 roaches is 100 gas. So that's 24 roaches times, well, so 600 gas for this many roaches, plus another 200 gas. That's like 800 gas in these roaches. And then to go Infestors, it kind of seems inconsistent. It seems greedy. It seems like you're trying to get a lot of things that all take a lot of gas. Of course, this push by Protoss is pretty greedy. Yeah, don't be afraid of a force when you've obviously got a bigger army. Just go up and kill it. And in general, this is just way too passive for a Zerg army. What? Whoopsies. Hi, I'm back, everybody. Yeah, my StarCraft just totally crashed. That was pretty brutal. Okay, so we are... Oops, replay bar. It doesn't matter. You already know what's going to happen. Right, so one of the most important things to do when you analyze your replays is to understand the moment when the balance of the game shifted. So look at the game right now. Who is ahead? Well, look, Zerg has more harvesters, right, and more income. I would like to see a third base. Zerg really has the ability to take a third base. Look at how big this army is. Look at how puny this army is. Yeah, there's a Colossus out. There's one Colossus out. More on the way. So I would start to get a little worried about the Colossi coming out. But at this moment, I mean, and of course, so there's Infestors will be in play. I feel like Neural Parasite is a reasonable response to Colossi. So, you know, if you have the ability to do that, go for it. Anyway, the point is, Tiny Hands looks firmly in the lead. 144 supply to 115. About the same size army, right? But slightly greater income for Tiny Hands. And just better map control at this point, I feel. I mean, of course, there's not a lot of map to control and positions is close. And just pulling up units lost, pretty even on both sides. Almost nothing has happened. So the point is Zerg is ahead. Now what happens? What is going to happen here? Zerg's moving in. Moving around. Okay, not much just yet. Going to fast forward. Because the thing is, sometimes you play a game and the whole game feels like a struggle. And then at the end, you know, either you lose or you just barely win. You just feel like, man, what did I do? I felt so off in that game. It felt so bad. How could I have possibly won that game? And then you look back and you realize, wait, I was ahead the entire game. And it was just one mistake that messed me up. It's really easy to get the wrong idea if you don't carefully look. So, okay, here, do you see the 2 Colossi are out? And they are going to help a lot in this battle. But we're just going to have to see what happens in this battle first. Now, are the Colossus being target fired? They are not. So I would already say that's a big big issue, because there's certainly the opportunity to target fire the Colossi. But still, there's just so many roaches. It looks like Tiny Hands is going to win this battle pretty easily. There's a nice arc, and that is going to decrease the effectiveness of the Colossi somewhat. There's a nice fungal, and so on and so forth. Okay, so Tiny Hands now is over extending himself, I feel. Look at how wounded these units are, right? And look at how many cannons there are. And look, if these cannons trace out an arc, where is the focal point of that? Right there. This is sort of the definition of a position you should not be engaging in. See if Tiny Hands realizes it. Okay, pulls back. By the way, if you don't play with health bars turned on, I do highly recommend it. It helps to make quick decisions like that. But yeah, Tiny Hands did overextend himself and lose a few too many units there compared to how many he needed to. But the question is, who won in that battle? Who did better? Bring up the units lost tab. Look at that. Enormous, crushing loss for the Protoss. Looks like about 2,700 minerals behind the Zerg now. That's enormous. Protoss lost so much more than the Zerg in that battle, even though Zerg spent a little too much time there. That's huge. That is absolutely huge. Zerg is even farther ahead than before. Notice that Zerg's money is piling up. It's not so good. Yes, it's important to focus in the big battles, but you do want to keep those injects going. You do want to keep production happening. Look at all that larva. 200 free supplies, so really no excuse. Need to spend this. Pretty easy to do that with just a quick 4SR. I don't know your hotkeys because I don't have those displayed. But anyway, the balance of the game. Okay, he does realize, okay, spend the money, spends all those larvae. Okay, pretty good. But 2 hatcheries really isn't enough at this stage in the game. I'm just going to throw that out there. Not enough. If you're not going to expand, at least have a macro hatchery, and that will also help with the injects. Tiny Hands has gone up to a hive. This feels like a sort of instinct, like a habit. Like, okay, I got my infestation pit, now I'm going to get my hive. But again, I don't see a lot of purpose in getting this hive really quickly. That money is better spent in other places, like units, or Aspire, for example, because these Colossi will become a threat if Protoss can make enough of them. And looks like he's pumping out of 2 robotics facilities now. I don't know if he was before. Anyway, Aspire could be a really great strategic decision. But the thing is, once the hive finishes, what are you going to do with it? Nothing. Nothing is coming out from the hive. That's another big issue. Hatchery coming up here. Very good. Late, but coming up. Still, with all the criticisms I'm making of Tiny Hands play, just all these criticisms, I just want the one thing you see when you watch this replay. The one thing you see should be Zerg is ahead. Zerg is enormously, gigantically far ahead. 160 supply to 117. Let's see how the worker count is doing right now. Still in favor for Zerg. Neither player has really completely saturated, although I guess they're starting to get mined out. And, okay, Tiny Hands has transitioned into Hydralisks. Hydralisks are always good, but if you're going to make a transition, don't just automatically transition. Don't just say, okay, I have roaches, now I'm going to get Hydras, because that's what go with roaches. No, you should think, what is my opponent doing? And what are the holes in my defense? And right now, the biggest hole is just that your opponent has a bunch of Colossi. And Colossi are pretty good against these kinds of units. Of course, not a lot of supporting forces for Buddy C. So as a matter of fact, this force absolutely cannot launch an assault of any kind. Yeah, good move by the Protoss to back off there, because Zerg would crush this army, despite the 4 Colossi. Production tab, what's going on? More Hydras, more Roaches, more Zerglings, more upgrades. And yeah, okay, I mean, getting the hive for the upgrades is nice, but if you're in the game and you realize I'm way ahead, you should just try to make sure you don't lose anything silly. So one of the things you should be doing is sort of like sending overlords around, check out this base to make sure he's not sneaking an expansion, send a Zergling on patrol on the left side, that kind of thing. And, and try to make your transitions in accordance with the fact you're ahead. So Zerg really should be getting that Spire because the only thing missing from making this the perfect, unstoppable force of destruction is some Corruptors, and maybe eventually some Broodlords. Okay. So Tiny Hands, yeah, a little bit of indecision there. Took a few more hits, bit more loss of health than he should have. But now the question is this a good moment for Tiny Hands to engage? We're going to have to see. If you know whether a battle is a good idea or not, then, obviously use your judgment. But if you're watching a replay and you're not sure whether an engagement was good or bad, just try to watch what happens during the engagement. Okay, so once again, 128 supply to 184. And we're going to see what goes on in this battle. Look at the supplies. Look at what's happening. Okay, supplies are now even, right? Huge difference. And if you look at units lost, suddenly it's about equalized. Remember before Protoss was way behind? Now it's about equalized. So that was a pretty bad battle for Zerg, right? Let's look at it a little more carefully. So I do want to emphasize that, okay, Colossi are scary to this kind of force. There's no denying it. They are scary. But you should also realize, Zerg is getting a lot of upgrades. +2 Carapace will be finishing soon. Yeah, I mean, I would really like to see Broodlords or Corruptors once we're getting this late into the game, once we're seeing so many Colossi. That's a big deal. But I think Zerg can still beat this army, but the problem is how the engagement occurs. So watch. Okay, so first of all, this cannon is getting free shots, right? Now, look at what's going on here. This Colossus in the back is firing. So all 6 of these Colossi are firing right now, but look at how many of the Zerg's units are firing. Very few, just this line in the front. All the others in the back are doing this little shuffle around to try to get in position. Some of the Hydralisks are going to fire, but not all of them. So this is a good instinct to reposition the army, but the problem is that while the army is repositioning, Protoss is getting free shots, right? Okay, so now Zerg units are firing, right? But already a lot of damage has been done to the Zerg units. In the meantime, all these Colossi are still there. They're still firing. And I should also add that even if Zerg started target firing them, they can always move back across these buildings. What else is going on? Didn't see if the Infestors got used well or not. But as I said before, another option against Colossi is just getting Neural Parasite. If you've got 2 Infestors, you have 2 Neural Parasites, turn 2 Colossi to your side. Pretty good. Yeah. Sorry, I thought I heard the door, so I was shocked. But anyway, essentially, these cannons are all, let's see, how many of them are firing? All of the cannons, every single cannon is getting to fire, okay? That's 5 cannons, 6 Colossi. Oh, I guess one of the Colossi did get taken out. But it's starting to become pretty clear that Zerg basically suicided his entire army in this one engagement. And as such, there really is nothing... There's no better advice that can be given in this game than don't do that. Pick your battles. Zerg rarely wants to launch a frontal assault when their whole opponent's army is at home and there's a lot of cannons positioned and there's sort of a good wall. You rarely want to attack in that situation. You want to control the map. You want to out-expand. You want to start getting really scary units like the Broodlord. Or, I mean, yeah. I don't like to focus too much on unit counters in general. They're important to think about, especially since, obviously, lots of Colossi, really good. But learning how to not engage in that position is really the big takeaway here. Just hang back, transfer some drones over to this expansion. Make sure you have your production high, because you can see that at the GG moment there are over 1,100 minerals in the bank, and it's entirely possible that could have been enough units for a defense. little hard to say, but making sure you can spend all that money, making sure you have plenty of money, making sure you have the right units, playing it a little bit more safe. I don't know how many other ways to say it, but I hope you've learned something about analyzing replays. Some of this seems a little obvious, but it's not really that intuitive. I had this problem when I first started seriously analyzing my replays. I had this real problem. I would come out of a game and I would be 100% sure I knew what happened. Totally 100%. And I would say, I don't need to analyze that replay. And I would kind of have to force myself to look at the replay, and I would look at it and realize I was totally wrong. Situations like this, you think, oh, I should have, if I had just had the right unit when I attacked, it would have been better. Well, no, you should have just not attacked. I feel like there's not very much else to say, but I will just make my usual speech of focus on your macro more than anything. I mean, learn stuff from these games, but when you're kind of practicing, when you're in the game, be thinking macro, 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 macro. Be thinking, spend my money, spend my money, spend my money, spend my money. And the counterpart, of course, people always say, spend your money. That is not the only part of macro. There is another very important part of macro, which is make money. You have to make it, and then you have to spend it. Making it is arguably more important than spending it, because you can spend it later. Tiny Hands could have, I feel, done better in saturating this faster. Now I actually am getting a phone calls, so I am going to take off. But this is Moduli Stack, and hope you enjoyed this. Bye now, and I love you all.